Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which isn't really live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally we have a special guest or two, when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, pull those belts tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Pace car is in. Green flag, green flag, green flag.
Welcome, everybody. Another week. Welcome to Speed Talk Live, coming out of Pocono. Man, we got a lot going on today, and I'm glad you're here joining in the conversation with us. We're going to be talking to Kyle Larson. We're going to be talking to Jeff Gordon. We've got just a lot to cover this week. I'm Greg Engel, editor, cupscene.com. And as always, at least for now, until he gets kidnapped by a llama in Peru, the associate editor, cupscene.com, Owen Johnson. Welcome, buddy.
Hey, Greg, thank you for having me. And I made it back from Peru, so we were all good for that.
Yeah, savvy world traveler. All right, let's talk Pocono. Ryan Blaney won. It was his first career win came there in 2017 when he won with the Wood brothers. And that's his second win this year. And after going winless through 15 races and everybody was piling on the defending series champ, he now has 2 wins in the midst of this summer stretch as we go towards the playoffs. And it made me wonder, and somebody asked him if he and his team are just hitting his stride.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the last 2 months we've been spectacular. I feel like the speed in our cars have been great. A couple finishes might not reflect that, but it's really none of our doing. Some of them, I mean, Gateway, we had a great shot to win. It just didn't really work out. New Hampshire, I thought we had a great run going and got spun out. And I am really feeling good about the speed in our cars right now across the board at Team Penske. I feel like we found a lot of stuff. I talked, the last month of short tracks. I think our short track program is fantastic, and we need to work on the 1.5 plus racetracks. And we come today to a big 2.5 miler and win it. So, gosh, we've done our homework since Charlotte and figure out how to be competitive and compete with the Hendrick boys and the Gibbs guys and 2311, and we're right there. So I feel like the summer last year we struggled a little bit, just trying to find some things that would work for us come playoff time, and I had to sit around all summer and hear people say that we suck, and we didn't want that this year. At the same time, we've been trying to find some things that are working for us, and they just have. Sometimes you try things that you want to focus on that you feel like is going to make your team and your organization better, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And just what we've been doing this year has been working. So I'm super proud of the effort, all the boys and girls at Team Penske for putting the effort in. They are great at what they do, and I couldn't find myself at another place because they just work really hard and they just put their heads down and figure out how to be better. And it's cool to drive for a company like that.
So it was good to see Blaney win. A lot happened behind that. I mean, if you just focus on the leaders and the fuel mileage and everything that was going on, it was a great race, but there was a lot going on back in the field. One of the highlights to me, well, you may not consider it a highlight if you're a Kyle Busch fan, but his summer of discontent continued on lap 121 with a bump from Corey LaJoie that sent him into the wall, out of the race. Coming into this week, there was a lot of controversy. People said everything from leave Corey alone to Corey should be banned for life and sent to an island, the same island that Napoleon went to. But in the end, Elton Sawyer, NASCAR Senior Vice President of Competition, said Tuesday that series officials, they weren't going to make a penalty. They weren't going to levy a penalty, and they viewed the contact as a racing incident. He told NBC Sports, we're in race, we're in competition, we got 2 guys racing hard. You listen to the in-car audio on LaJoie's radio, you don't hear anything from the driver. There's some comments made by the crew chief and spotter. Neither one of them is driving the car. So you didn't hear anything from the driver. Yeah, they said they planned to have a conversation with Corey just to make sure he's in a good place. But yeah, that one, we let guys race. And when you see it that way, there was the crew chief did say some disparaging comments, but it didn't come from the driver. And unless we're sitting in that driver's seat in the heat of battle, so to speak, we really don't know what the mindset was. But I tend to lean towards not making a call on that. Although he did come out and talk to the media and say those comments Elton did about why they didn't. So I know you agree with the call, Owen.
Yeah, I do agree with it, and I think it's particularly because of a comment some of the officials made. They should look at it further based on social media reaction, to paraphrase. And I think these decisions just should not be based on the social media reaction. If NASCAR didn't think it was anything in the race, I think they should stand by that call. Social media really should not be deciding the penalties here. That's how we fan the flames of the huge Wallace Bowman controversy we talked about last week. I think it was an iffy situation. Could have been called. Obviously Kyle Busch kind of got on the rev limiter. There's arguments for and against LaJoie, but if NASCAR didn't call it in the race, I don't think the social media reaction should be the reason they call it later. So I stand by that, mostly for that reason.
And I'll go back to the Wallace Bowman controversy at Chicago. And I think a lot of that controversy had to do with the fact that, poor Bubba Wallace has got his haters, and no matter what he does, it's going to be wrong in their eyes, and they're going to sound off. And I agree with you. Penalties should not be decided by social media, though I do know that NASCAR does, look at social media to gauge things, right? To gauge the interest in things. And the reason I think that, and I think I got a strong case for this, is sometimes you'll see little leaks that'll come out from NASCAR that, we're gonna race on the moon or something, kind of out there, and then all of a sudden somebody will report it as NASCAR is talking about this. An example of that is someone reported this week that NASCAR told their employees to make sure their passports are up to date. Well, that's a pretty sure bet that we're either going to Canada or Mexico next year, even though the schedule still hasn't been released. But it's leaks like that, and they kind of gauge the interest. Now, this one's a pretty set in stone, but there have been some in the past where NASCAR's maybe wanted to gauge, see what the feedback is from fans on certain things, but certainly not in a penalty call, not on the field of play. They don't want to decide anything on that. Maybe they want to decide where we play. I do know, for example, that at Chicago, they had people from other cities coming to look at the street race with the possibility of saying, hey, we can do this kind of thing anywhere. So we may see another street race somewhere based on that. But I do think that sometimes they do gauge interest, but not penalties for sure. By the way, wrapping up Pocono, the garage area was littered with a total of 17 cars with DNFs. That was the most cars to finish with DNFs since the 2023 Daytona 500, which had a total of 17. Not something you typically see at Pocono, but there was a lot of carnage there. And I feel for the teams because obviously it cost the money, but it made it interesting to the fans. And I thought it was a great race. I can't say that about every Pocono race. A lot of these Pocono races can get long and drawn out, but two different sets of fuel mileage strategies, and it worked out to perfection for Ryan Blaney and his team. Good for him. Great win. Penske swept the weekend because there was a doubleheader in Iowa for IndyCar, and Penske won both of those. So that was good. So Penske sweep. Now Penske's got all three of their cars in the playoffs. As we go into the summer stretch towards the playoffs, they're going to be three of the contenders for sure. It'll be interesting to see how far they go. All right, let's catch up on some news. Go ahead.
Just to clarify on that, it was 13 cars that failed to finish. Daytona 500 had 17, so just 4 short, but not quite the same number.
Well, I said the garage area was literally a total of 13 cars. Did I say 17?
17, yeah.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't be drinking this early. No, it was 13 cars, 13 DNFs, guys. Owen's keeping me honest. 13 cars. There were 17 in that 2023 Daytona 500. So bottom line, there was a lot of carnage at Pocono, which is not something Pocono is normally known for. So it was a good race, but felt bad for the teams that did crash. And I feel bad for Kyle Busch and hope he can turn things around. So we'll see about that. All right, let's move on to other news. JD Motorsports won't enter a car this weekend at Indy. They filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in South Carolina in early April. And that allowed the team to keep competing while reorganizing the debt. But they've decided that they've actually given their number and their charter to another team. So JD Motorsports, unfortunately, is probably not going to be around much longer. It's a shame, but teams come and go, especially these smaller teams. It's just a part of this sport. It's hard, and it's expensive. And I remember Dale Earnhardt Jr. one time said, if you want to make a lot of money in racing, you start with, or you want to make a little money in racing, you got to start with a lot of money. So there you go. So it's tough. But we're entering the off week now. And during the off week, Daniel Suarez will be competing in Brazil at Interlagos, which sounds like it would be a lot of fun. I've been to Interlagos. What a great track. And Brazil is just a cool place. He's actually getting married down there. He's finally marrying Julia Piquet, daughter of three-time F1 champ Nelson Piquet. And, why not celebrate your wedding by racing? So he's going to do that in the Brazil series. So that'll be fun to watch. He's going to be racing a Camaro down there. And something about Julia, I have seen her at tracks, and she is the most intense and focused person I've ever seen. When Daniel's out on the track, whether it's during practice or qualifying, she will be anywhere but the pit box. Now during the race, she's usually at the pit box, sitting with everybody else, but she is just the most intense looking, and you just kind of want to stand out of the way. But she's a former television reporter there in Brazil, and good for them. I'm happy for him, our newest American citizen, and he'll be racing down there. Speaking of racing, in a couple of weeks we're going to Richmond, which I know, Owen, is near and dear to your heart because that's in your area. And for the NASCAR Cup Series weekend at Richmond, they've announced that they're going to use standard prime tires and also option tires for use during the weekend, one for practice, two for the race. And the same thing they did at the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro Speedway. The prime tire will have yellow lettering and the options with red. There's 8 sticker sets for the red, 6 prime, 2 option. Now, NASCAR for the race was not going to mandate the teams use their sets. However, all 4 tires must match at all times, so no running primes on the right and options on the left. I don't think any team would do that. Now, let me say this about that. I think it would be more interesting if NASCAR did mandate that you use 1 set each of tires during a race. I really do, because I'm going to be honest with you. At North Wilkesboro, when we ran them, I was there for that. It didn't see that big of a difference to me. But I'm not in the car. I don't know if it got easier to drive or harder to drive. Didn't seem like that was going to be that big a deal. So I wonder if it's going to be that big a deal at Richmond, if one tire is going to give them more speed over the other tires. And I think that if we mandated them like they do in Formula One says you have to run a certain set of tires. IndyCar the same way. I think if we did that, it would be a lot bigger deal and a lot more exciting and a lot more strategy for the teams and for the fans. But they're not mandating them yet, but I'll bet you that's going to be their next choice, their next step. What do you think about that, Owen?
Well, I think that's definitely the biggest difference from the All-Star race. The choice element, the only time they don't have a choice is in qualifying when they must use the prime set. But there at North Wilkesboro, they were forced to start on the option tire, and that gave them the choice from there. And the winning choice ended up being sticking with the option tire, not changing tires. At Richmond, which is a longer race, they might play differently. That might be more strategy elements than a shorter All-Star race format. And I think the crew chiefs will have a lot more say, especially since Richmond has really become a strategy racetrack. So there's another strategy element here. And I think it's perfect timing for the strategy race that always is Richmond. Of all the tracks to adopt these tires, I think Richmond is the perfect one for it.
Now, I forgot, are you going to be back in England by then, or are you going to try and go to Richmond?
I will be in England for during Richmond, then I'll be back after that, back for some more racing in Daytona, Atlanta later this year.
Okay. All right. So you're going to miss Richmond. I think we're going to get together at Daytona because Daytona is my home track. So that'll be fun. You can teach me some basic law anyway. Speaking of tires, 6 teams tested tires at Bristol this week, which I thought was kind of strange because the tires were such a big deal in the spring race and it gave such a great race. I sure as heck hope they don't change it up too much from what they had in the spring. But 6 teams tested tires. Goodyear can do their thing, but hopefully they're going to bring that same compound back and we're going to have just as good a race on the night race as we did in the spring race, which was a phenomenal race. All right.
Just rant and rave like you do to the TV during sport.
Before we move away from Pocono, let's park it here for a second. And that's a pun intended, because while I wasn't there were plenty of reports about traffic getting into the track Sunday. And there was reports that some fans didn't get in until the race was well underway. And there was even a few who said they missed it completely. Now, there was an early morning thunderstorm, which the track said forced them to have everyone get out of the weather, including their employees. And I get that. If you've got lightning around, you don't want people running around. And you know, the parking lots are grass. And as we saw at North Wilkesboro, that turns them into mud. So I get it. But I really don't know if that was the whole reason. And I think we may never know. The track, of course, apologized. But if you did miss part of a race, you deserve at least a partial refund. And by all means, if you missed an entire race, if your ticket never got scanned, you deserve nothing short of a full refund, and I hope you get it. We can think back to a couple of years ago when Kentucky Speedway first opened. Parking was such a nightmare there that they had the same effect. People missed the race because they couldn't get into the track. The next year, Kentucky Speedway had a whole PR thing. We fixed it, and I remember going to the media tour. We had when we had the media tours, and Kentucky Speedway had set up this whole thing where they're going to do a press conference, and they did the press conference, but they had traffic cones and they had like under construction things. It was really kind of cool. But their whole thing was that they had fixed the parking problem. They did, and it was easier, but they never fixed it completely. And you can see, because Kentucky Speedway is no longer on the schedule. Am I saying that's going to happen with Pocono? No, I think this is a one-time deal. Something happened behind the scenes we're not hearing about, maybe. And maybe it was just the weather. I don't know. Whatever the reason is, as long as the track makes it right with the fans who missed part of the race or all of the race, and we don't have this again, then fine, we'll move on. Look, my advice. Now, I go to plenty of races a year. I don't go to all of them anymore. And I be honest, I don't miss that kind of grind. But here's what I do. I show up a minimum of 4 hours before green flag. Now, granted, I a lot of times have things going on. We have press conferences. I have to, meet with a driver or a team for a story. But I can't remember a time other than back in the late 80s, maybe, when you used to go to Daytona. Look, if the Daytona race started at noon or 1 o'clock back in the 80s, if you weren't there at sunrise, you were going to sit in traffic. I mean, there was 300,000 people. So, back then you got there. I remember leaving my house at 4 a.m. for the 30 to 45-minute drive up there just to miss traffic, and still missing traffic, still getting in some traffic. So here's my bottom line. Come 4 hours early, because a NASCAR race is not an afternoon thing. It's an entire day. You need to go tailgate, hang out, meet fans, enjoy the day. And it's an all day affair. So plan on coming early, going to the midway. If the gate's not open yet, that's fine. Hang out, like I said, with fans. Bring a grill if you can, if you got to pick up or whatever. Or trust me, you'll make some friends going to a NASCAR race. And if you don't like to sit in traffic, make it a minimum of 4 hours before the race. Now, that being said, I don't want to blame anybody that at Pocono who said I went 2 hours before the race and didn't miss the race. You should still be able to get to the race. It may take a little longer, but 4 hours is my minimum. And with post race, you don't want to jump on, the highway soon after the checkered flag falls. Again, granted, I normally don't leave for a couple hours after the race, but I've got post race stuff to do. But a lot of times, you could go to the parking lot and do kind of a reverse tailgate where you hang out in the parking lot. I remember doing that for years at Daytona because us and the media, even 2 hours after the race, there was still a lot of traffic. Those days are long gone, sadly. We used to go to the parking lot. We'd have a little campfire and we would drink and have a ball. But now, if you wait a couple hours after the race, you're usually not going to run into traffic. But Sure. Like I said, I have a reason to stay there for a couple hours afterwards. But you can either sit at the track and relax in your car or be stressed out sitting in traffic. It's your choice. It's going to be that way. And by the way, if you're one of those people who like to lead 20 laps before the end, well, like curses on you. Plenty happens in the final laps. We've seen that this year. You paid the money, get the full experience and avoid the traffic or set in the traffic. But the bottom line is most tracks do a great job of traffic control. And because experiences like what happened at Pocono sour it for fans. And trust me, without you fans, none of us would have a job. And we want to make sure that the experience is as best it can possibly be. And that includes not getting in, not getting stuck coming into the track or going out. So that's my rant about that. Also, another trick I want to tell you, if you're going to travel to a NASCAR race, you're going to stay in a hotel. If you don't see a hotel right by the track, I have stayed 30 to 40 minutes away usually, and you'll find the best rates. And usually 30 to 40 minutes driving to a race, if you go early, is not a big deal. So that's my tip for you. 40 minutes away, 3 to 4 hours before the race starts, and plan on hanging out for a couple hours afterwards. What's your take on this, Owen?
Well, I'll say, just going back to the Pocono deal itself, my experience with Pocono, and I was fortunate to go to up to that race last year, my experience with it was the traffic situation is always a little bit more difficult at Pocono. And that's not a reflection on whoever's doing the traffic management. It's not a reflection on NASCAR, all the local police. That's just a reality of where the track is. It's surrounded by just a few 2-lane country roads. There's not a lot of options to route the cars on, and there's not many entrances into the track itself. Pocono is definitely the exception. Most tracks, you're never going to wait that long to get in. Obviously, some you will. Now, I'll admit, we were in New York too, so we were far outside your 40-minute rule, so we could watch a soccer game on Sunday, but that is, or on Saturday before the race. But that's just my London side coming out, and the extra drive was entirely our own fault. And ordinarily, I definitely agree with you. Stay within 40 minutes, leave relatively early, but don't think that Pocono is the rule. That is definitely the exception. There's usually quite good traffic management, but know the track. Sometimes tracks like Pocono will have a little bit more time you have to budget. Wake up, and we woke up plenty early to get there on time for Pocono.
I always forget it's so close to New York. That just kind of blows my mind. You're not that far from New York to go to Pocono. All right, putting Pocono behind us. I'll tell you this though, I'm glad we don't go there two times a year anymore like we used to. We used to go like a month apart. I never understood that. Then they did that disaster of a double header. But they tried it and it didn't work out. So we put that behind us and we look forward to the Brickyard. That's right, the Brickyard, the big track for the first time since 2020. We're not going to be on the road course. And I'm happy for that. It's going to be great to see them back on the big course, on the big track. One driver who'll be getting the full Indy NASCAR experience is Conor Daly. He's raced on the oval in the Indy 500. Sub for Jack Harvey in the IndyCar race at Iowa last weekend, and he'll be competing in the truck race at IRP on Friday, Indianapolis Raceway Park. I know it's some kind of O'Reilly Parts Oil Slick Track 400, whatever. It'll always be IRP to me, one of my favorite little tracks. I used to love to cover races there because their media center was a double wide trailer in the infield, and we used to have to tranche through the mud. He's going to be racing there Friday night. And then he's going to be in the Xfinity race on Saturday. I had a chance to spend a few minutes with him this week. We talked about that and him going into Indy and what it's like to not be a full-time driver and to be able to pop around to different series, whether it's open wheel and NASCAR and other forms of racing. And good morning, Connor. I'm extremely jealous of your life, man. Seeing you bounce around these disciplines. I know you want to be full-time, but I know it's got to be a blast. IndyCar and trucks and cars. I'm curious though, when you do that, do you have like a personal services contract or something that follows you, or do you have to like adapt to different sponsors when you go to these different series and that? And I'm looking more on the sponsorship side. How hard is it to juggle the fact that you're putting these one race deals together with the fact that you have to find, either a personal services contract to follow you or some kind of, delivering the sponsorship to the team you're going to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm super honest with everything. I don't know if you listen to my podcast, but like, I will always talk about the these things. And like, yeah, the only reason I'm racing is not because I've been selected to participate. It's like we have partnerships that have made this happen, right? Like there's money involved, of course. Power Plus, who's on the truck this weekend, has been a supporter of mine for a long time. People I met through Travis Pastrana when we went boat racing together, randomly. So you got to keep these relationships strong. And obviously Polka, who's our Indy 500 partner, they're along with us for the Xfinity race and then the next two truck races that I'm doing as well. So the whole goal of, well, I mean, the only reason I essentially still have a career is because of the relationship building that you have to do in this sport, the putting yourself in position to be a race car driver. I would like to, just continue to be able to do that and make it worth everyone's time. But like, every deal that we work on is essentially, what can we do with what we have? And so like, this is what we have right now. There will be, unless a miracle happens, we're not adding any more than what we've all announced. Like we've been working on this whole program for a long time, for like 6-8 months, just to do something. Although the Xfinity deal came up very randomly, like very last minute. But it was a great opportunity to be able to do that. But again, it's an available seat, costs a certain amount of money. We all are familiar with how this sport works nowadays. So, but that's what we do. We try to build these partnerships, make everyone proud of us. And Polka Dot loved the Indy 500. We obviously went and had a good chance at winning that race once again, and got them a really strong finish. So we want to try to obviously keep delivering for them as we go, and then we'll see what happens. My goal is to strengthen one of these partnerships to the level that we can look at a couple full-time options in something next year. I don't know what that is yet. I don't know if I ever will.
Outstanding. And as a follow-up, based on your limited sim experience with Toyota on the big track, is there anything at all that you think you might be able to carry over from the 500 into the Xfinity car, or is it just too different of a discipline?
I mean, I've been trying to think of that myself. I actually don't know until I get out there. From the sim experience, I mean, it seems to be, in the sim, at least, you're close to flat in a couple of the corners, not all of them. But obviously our goal at Indy is to be flat and for 4 laps in qualifying. But realistically, in the race, you're not flat at all unless you're by yourself. So, there's going to be lifting. There's going to be I think the visual references, I think every bump in the track is something that I feel like I know in my soul because I've done so many laps there. So you kind of know where the grip is and when it is, and then how much of the track you can use. I do think a lot of that information will translate. But until I actually do the first practice session, I won't really know. So I'm hoping more translates than I think, but there's definitely going to be just a few things track knowledge wise and kind of what the track does and what it, every part about, spacing and stuff like that. I think it should be useful.
No, you got me thinking. You race these different disciplines, and yeah, you want to have a full-time ride, right? Wherever that happens to be. But one of the advantages is because you're sitting there talking about one in the Daytona 500, you've been in the Indy 500, you've been in the Daytona 500. I mean, come on, that's really like a cool resume to have, man. Is there a race that or a discipline that you would like to try just to kind of add to that bucket list? Because it's pretty incredible if you ask me.
I mean, honestly, the only thing left for me that is massively on the bucket list is the Le Mans 24-hour race. Really want to do Le Mans. Have not had a chance to do that quite yet. But that's really for sure the last one on the bucket list. I mean, part of me, I actually almost legitimately had a deal to do the V8 supercar race at Bathurst, the Bathurst 1000. Wow. Had a contract, was going to do the race with Andretti, me and Alexander Rossi. And last second, they switched me with James Hinchcliffe. So I was like, oh, that would have been a really cool one to do. But there's no way in the world that chance will probably ever come again, but who knows? We'll see. So those are pretty high on the bucket list, but yeah, I've been very lucky. I've had a lot of great partners to put me in positions to do that. I've had a lot of great interactions. This sport, I've actually met a lot of fantastic people in the in the NASCAR realm. I really enjoy communicating. Certainly with Sam Hunt has been really cool. Cody and Al Neese, like Al Neese calls me before like every Indy 500. Like he's a very, very nice guy to me, very supportive. I have enjoyed working with the people that I've worked with. And it's a great sport, and I hope to be able to do more. But yeah, I am here now, and I know what's happening this week, and after that, who knows what else can happen.
And remind me again of and folks what your podcast is so we can find it.
Great question. Yeah, the Speed Street podcast. I have an interview with Will Power here in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so. It's on. We're under Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s Dirty Mo Media banner, so maybe not quite as popular as Denny Hamlin's podcast, but we're gonna work on it.
All right, thanks, pal.
Thank you.
By the way, on Saturday there's going to be a press announcement and a media availability with reigning NASCAR Xfinity Series champion Cole Custer, where, quote, the 26-year-old racer will announce his 2025 plans. Well, guess what? I think we're going to get the announcement that we've all been waiting for. He's going to be the full-time Cup driver for the revamped Haas Racing next year, the one-car Cup team run by Gene Haas and Cole's dad. So we're looking for that Saturday. So we're going back to the big track. And I think no matter what we do, this first race back on this big track is going to be phenomenal. It's going to be great. We've got the next gen cars. Everything's going to be wonderful. There's 30 years since Jeff Gordon won the first one, so we're going to be celebrating that. Mr. Hendrick's going to be driving the pace car. We'll see that. So it's going to be great. And there should be a good turnout, but we have to be wary because the racing that we're going to see on Saturday and Sunday, Saturday we've got the Xfinity race, on Sunday, is that going to keep these crowds coming back? I mean, I remember the last Xfinity race there. It seemed to run in front of nearly empty seats, given the fact that, of course, it's cavernous, right? I mean, it's a cavernous place. If you've ever been there, I've been there. It's huge, but it wasn't a good optic. So we're going to have to see if people get tired of being back on the oval, but we'll get past that next year because this year it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be phenomenal. And I know you're looking forward to it, Owen.
Absolutely. And I think a theme I got from the drivers in some of their pre-race coverage this week has been that the oval is just a little bit more special. So whether or not the fans come, and I really hope they do, the drivers are certainly looking forward to it. And that's true of one driver who I got to speak to this week, a Cup Series driver who has just as recent experience in the Indy Oval as Daly, and that's Kyle Larson, who ran the Indy 500 this year. And an attempt at the double, obviously, Charlie got rained out. We talked about that at the time. But he said the IndyCar experience didn't really translate to the Cup car since the cars are so different. So I asked him whether he remembers the old Cup car, the previous generation, 4 years ago, and whether that carries over on the Oval, and then ultimately whether he prefers the Oval or the road course. So here's what he told me. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for your time. On the other hand, to how the Indy cars drive, how much do you remember from how the old Cup cars used to drive on the Oval, and how does that experience with the previous generation translate to today, based on what you've seen from the simulator and any other prep leading up to the race?
Yeah, I haven't done any prep. I don't ever do any sim stuff, but Indy is a pretty simple racetrack. There's not really two ways to get around it. I mean, there's probably two ways. There's probably not more than two ways, though, to get around it. So, turn one is a slick corner. Usually you get really tight on exit. You get tight typically in the middle of two. And then 3 and 4, you usually have more grip. I don't know if that's just the way that the sun sets or what, but turn 3 has got some bumps, but it usually is a grippier balance. And then same with turn 4. So it felt that way in the IndyCar as well. And I imagine it'll still feel that same way, old car versus new car. I think the balance of what I just described will be similar. Indy was very tough to pass in the past with the old car, and I think it'll be even tougher to this time. So, executing a great strategy and also, having good pit stops and restarts, all that's going to be important. So I think restarts with the way our cars are now and the durability and toughness, and then how difficult it is to pass, I think restarts are going to be very, very aggressive and crazy. So that's where I think the majority of the excitement will come from. But yeah, I think our car should hopefully be good. I think we have some good data points after Pocono. We were not very good, but Chase was really strong. So I think we can look at some notes there, and hopefully we'll be competitive this weekend.
And are you looking forward to heading to the Oval any more than you did the road course in the past years?
I really enjoyed the road course. But when at least for me, when I think of Indy, I want to win on the Oval. If I could pick, winning on the road course or the Oval, I would take the Oval. So I feel like now we have a crown jewel event back. I didn't think that the road course was much of a crown jewel. It just felt like another race. Where now the Brickyard 400 is back. So, that's a race on everybody's bucket list. I don't really know if anybody in the field has won the Brickyard 400 before. So, yeah, it's one that we all want to win.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Kyle Larson's going to be a contender this week, I think. So speaking of Jeff Gordon, he famously won the Brickyard 400 in 1994. He's spent a lot of time at Indy. He grew up near the track. He was telling me that he used to get, when he was sponsored by Valvoline, the oil that Valvoline had came from, you would go actually to garage, Gasoline Alley, the garage area, to get your oil from Valvoline because they were based at the track. So he spent a lot of time at Indy. And I know he may not have the same sort of awe of the place he used to be, but now he's an executive at Hendrick, which is still bizarro to me. I got a chance to ask him about going back there and seeing his former car racing on that track with William Byron behind the wheel. I know the awe you could feel when you walk into Indy has been tempered somewhat because you've been there and you spent so much time there. But have you allowed yourself to imagine what it would be like to see William Byron deliver that 24 into victory lane?
I mean, it's hard when you drove the 24 your entire career. It's certainly something that's very near and dear to my heart. But at the same time, and I just think William's a great race car driver and a great person, and Rudy and the whole team. I mean, they're fantastic. I love what they're doing. But in my role, I'm spending equal amount of time with all the drivers and all the teams and cheering for all of them. So, I know that our fan base, I know that our sponsors, and I know, that William and Rudy, they both carry a lot of pride representing that 24 and the fan base. And so I think they know they're going to feel a little bit of added pressure this weekend because of what happened 30 years ago. But I also know that's just motivating them to deliver because they want it themselves just as bad as anybody else does.
Thanks as always for your time, Jeff. I appreciate it. So you would think that my pick for this week would be a Hendrick driver, that it would be William Byron. And that would be a great story if the 24 won, as Jeff said, but any of the Hendrick cars won. But my pick is a Penske driver. They seem to be having a dream season. All the drivers have won. They swept, as we mentioned, Iowa and IndyCar, and then Blaney won at Pocono last weekend. And Roger Penske does own the track. So why wouldn't it be a Penske driver? Which Penske driver? I'm going to say Joey Logano. And I think that he's due, and it would not surprise me at all to see Joey Logano, or if not, a Penske driver in victory lane this Sunday. And what's your take, Owen?
Well, one thing that Kyle Larson said that I thought was really interesting is that he didn't really feel anything different, any new emotion coming to Indy with the Hendrick car, since the Ganassi cars that he used to drive were always set up so well for the track, and obviously he got quite good results in the 42 back in those days. Well, the Ganassi team is now the Trackhouse team. The 99 car was so close to winning on the road course at Indy last year, and their one team really needs a win this year. So I think it's going to be the one of Ross Chastain getting the win this weekend in a Ganassi car turned Trackhouse with that good setup that Larson talked about.
Interesting. So there you go. Ross Chastain or Joey Logano. We'll have to see. By the way, Trackhouse Racing, took on an investment partner this week, which was kind of bizarre. I do have the coverage on that on Forbes. I also have coverage of my conversation with Conor Daly. I'll have that up later this week. You're going to have a preview out this week, and I'm sure it's going to be heavily favored in Ross Chastain's favor. Is that safe to say?
We'll keep it unbiased. I'll get all the drivers' opinions.
There you go. All right. Check out cupscene.com, Forbes Sports Money for my coverage of the sports angle or the business angle of NASCAR. Then we'll come out next week. We'll get ready for the 2-week break. I think next week we're going to talk Olympics. We'll see. And maybe we'll get some Olympic picks. So I'll put that on your radar, Owen. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have fun this weekend. We appreciate your support. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.
All right, there's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.